Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The winds over the vale were sharp that morning, slicing through the mountain mists like thin, cold knives. The eyrie, high and pale upon its crag of stone, gleamed like a fortress carved from ice. Within its halls, fires burned low, and servants moved like ghosts, whispering of snow on the high pass and of Lord Baelish's return from Gulltown. Sansa Stark, though she wore the face and name of Elaine Stone, stood at one of the moon-shaped windows, watching the fog rise from the valleys below. The world looked soft and distant there, safe perhaps, but she knew better. Nothing in the Vale was ever as it seemed. Petyr Baelish had taught her that. He called her his little dove, though she was no longer a child. He said he meant to make her safe, to give her all her heart desired. But Sansa had learned to listen not to his words, but to the shadow behind them. For every kindness he offered came with a string, and each string was tied to his own quiet hunger for power. That morning, the eyrie seemed to breathe uneasily. Lord Jon Royce had arrived 2 days earlier, bringing with him his stern, questioning eyes. He did not trust Baelish, nor the girl who called herself Elaine. His men lingered near the halls, armor gleaming even in torchlight. They spoke to the maids and to the knights of the Vale, and already Sansa could hear the unease spreading. She had become skilled at silence. When she walked the corridors, she kept her head bowed, her eyes demure. But inside, her thoughts were sharp as a hawk's talon. Every word she heard, every glance she caught, she stored away like coins hidden in a purse. It was on such a walk, that very morning, that she found the box. The maester had sent her to the old storage chamber beneath the solar, a place where old records were kept. Parchments sealed with dust and spider webs, ledgers of harvests long past. She had gone alone, carrying a small lantern that cast a wavering orange glow on the damp stone walls. The chamber was colder than the halls above. Crates and coffers lined the walls, most marked with the falcon and moon of House Arryn. But one, smaller than the rest, caught her eye. It was of dark wood, polished smooth but worn by time. Gloxinia flowers were carved along its lid, lush blossoms curling around a circle of unfamiliar sigils. When Sansa brushed her fingers across it, the dust rose like a sigh. She had never seen Gloxinias before, not in Winterfell, nor in the Vale. There was something sorrowful about them, delicate petals carved with such care, yet hidden in this forgotten place. She tried the latch. It was sealed with wax, stamped with a sigil she could not place, a black crescent upon a field of deep green. Curiosity prickled through her. "What are you, little box?" she whispered. When she lifted it, she found it heavier than it appeared. Inside, something shifted softly, as though a small glass vial rolled within. For a long moment, she stood there, the lantern light flickering against her face, caught between fear and wonder. Then footsteps echoed down the corridor above, and she quickly set the box beneath her cloak. That night, when the fires dimmed and the eyrie fell quiet, she sat upon her narrow bed, the box before her. The seal glimmered faintly in the candlelight. She hesitated, knowing too well that curiosity was a dangerous friend in the game Petyr Baelish played. Yet she could not resist. She broke the wax with the tip of a hairpin. The lid creaked open. Inside lay a folded sheaf of parchment tied with a blue ribbon, and beside it, a small vial of cloudy liquid, its glass stoppered tight, the color faintly milky, like moonlight caught in water. Sansa stared at it, her breath caught. She had seen such a vial before. The night her Aunt Lysa died, when Peter had held her trembling and whispered that poor Lysa had gone mad with jealousy. That vial had held the poison that sent Lysa through the moon door. Her fingers trembled. The letters smelled faintly of lavender and something older, mold and age. When she untied the ribbon and unfolded the first sheet, she saw writing she recognized at once. Lysa Arryn's hand. Her aunt's letters were not long, but they were filled with fear. They spoke of the whispers from Gulltown and of a promise made by Peter that she no longer trusted. The last letter ended abruptly. If he means to betray me, I will leave proof. It shall be where he cannot touch it, among the ledgers of old grain and taxes. If he lies, the truth will undo him. The truth. Sansa felt her heart beat faster. The air in her chamber seemed thinner, colder. The candlelight flickered as though stirred by invisible breath. Peter had lied to Lysa. He had lied to everyone. And now she held something, proof, perhaps, that could undo him. But she also knew what he was capable of when cornered. A sound at the door made her start. She quickly blew out the candle and hid the box beneath her blanket just as the latch turned. "Elaine?" came Peter's soft, silken voice. Her heart leapt. "My lord," she said quickly, her voice calm. "You startled me." Baelish stepped into the room, smiling that knowing smile. The lamplight caught the sharp lines of his face. "You're awake still? Restless?" "I could not sleep." He studied her for a moment. "Strange dreams?" Sansa forced a small smile. "Only dreams." Baelish came closer, brushing a lock of her hair from her cheek. "The snow has begun to fall again. The mountain passes will close soon. You and I will be alone here, Elaine. Safe, for a time." "Yes," she murmured. He lingered a moment longer, his eyes unreadable. Then he left, his steps soft on the stone. When the door closed, Sansa sat still for a long time, her pulse thrumming in her ears. The candle's last ember glowed faintly. Beneath the blanket, the box seemed to hum with secrets. She had thought herself a pawn, but perhaps, she thought now, she held something that could make her more, something powerful enough to break Peter Baelish's game. And the night outside the Eyrie grew darker still. Dawn came slowly to the vale, pale and thin through the drifting mists. The Eyrie, perched high among the clouds, seemed a fortress adrift between worlds, too high for the living, too low for the gods. Snow fell in quiet veils across the courtyard, softening the sharp angles of stone and freezing the fountains into stillness. Sansa woke to the cold bite of morning and the weight of the box still hidden beneath her bed. For a long while, she did not move. She listened to the soft stirrings of servants beyond her door, to the faint sound of bells from the distant Sept tower. The memory of Peter's visit still lingered, the warmth of his gaze turning her stomach. She rose and washed in silence. The girl who looked back at her from the polished bronze mirror was not Sansa Stark of Winterfell. Her hair was darker now, her cheeks paler. Yet in her eyes, gray and clear as frost, something of the north remained. "Elaine Stone," she whispered, as if testing the name. It sounded false to her ears. The day began as most did, small councils, servants moving through the halls, letters arriving from the outlying castles of the Vale. But behind every word spoken at breakfast, behind every smile, she felt the weight of secrets pressing close. Lord Petter was in high spirits that morning. He sat at the long table in the high hall, speaking with Maester Coleman about the stores of grain and the coming snows. His eyes found Sansa's often, lingering with that quiet amusement that both flattered and frightened her. When the meal was done, he rose and offered her his arm. "Walk with me," he said softly. She obeyed. Together, they climbed the winding stairs to the garden terrace where snow lay thick upon the stone benches. The air was sharp, stinging her nose and cheeks. From here, the mountains stretched out endless and white, their peaks lost in mist. "You've been quiet," Pedder said at last. "I have been thinking," she replied. "Ah, thinking is a dangerous pastime for those who must pretend." His smile was faint, but his eyes glittered. "What troubles my sweet Elaine?" "Only the cold," she said carefully. He studied her for a moment, then brushed snow from her sleeve. "Winter will pass. It always does. Remember, the cold can make a flower bloom brighter, if it survives." His fingers lingered on her arm, light as breath. Then he turned away, his cloak sweeping the snow. "Lord Royce grows tiresome," he said. "He questions every decision I make. He means to unmask me before the Lords of the Vale, perhaps even expose you." Sansa felt her heart tighten. "What will you do?" "What I must." His voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I will remind him that I am Lord Protector. The Vale is loyal to me, for now." He left her there among the snowdrifts, his shadow disappearing down the stair. She stood motionless, watching the falcons wheel far below until her hands grew numb. That evening, when the torches were lit and the castle settled into quiet, she returned to her chamber and drew out the box once more. The letters lay where she had left them, their ink faded to brown. But as she looked closer, she noticed something she had missed before, a second fold in the ribbon where another scrap of parchment had been hidden. It was a short note, written in a hand she did not recognize. "If Lysa falls, the falcon flies to the lion. The key lies in Gulltown. The poison is but the first feather." The lion, the Lannisters. Her blood ran cold. Could Baelish have conspired with the Lannisters even now, while the Vale believed itself untouched by the wars of the realm? A knock at her door startled her. Quickly, she hid the letters beneath the mattress. "Come," she said. The door opened to reveal Maya Stone, her dark hair wind-tangled from the stables. "My lady," Maya said with a bow, "Lord Royce asks for you. He waits in the lower gallery." Sansa's pulse quickened. "Did he say why?" "He would not tell me." She hesitated only a moment, then followed. The corridors were dim, torches guttering in the drafts that curled through the stones. The Aerie seemed to whisper as she passed, the sigh of old air through narrow halls. Lord Jan Royce stood by the window when she entered, broad and grim in his heavy cloak. His beard was dusted with frost. "Lady Elaine," he said, his tone polite but cool. "Or should I call you something else?" Her breath caught. "My lord?" He turned to her fully, his gray eyes sharp as flint. "I have known bastards and highborn girls alike. You are neither." Sansa's heart thudded. She had prepared for this moment, but the suddenness of it made her throat dry. "I do not understand." He raised a hand. "Do not lie to me, girl. You have the look of Catelyn Tully about you. The same eyes, the same voice. I knew her well once. You are her daughter." The air between them seemed to freeze. "My mother is dead," she said softly, her voice trembling. "That much I know," Royce replied. "And I know too that Peter Baelish shelters you here for reasons of his own. He tells us you are his natural daughter, yet I have heard whispers, strange ones, of a girl from the north who vanished after the war. I mean to know the truth." Sansa forced her gaze to steady. "You risk much, my lord, speaking thus against the Lord Protector." Royce's mouth twisted. "Aye, and yet I would risk more to protect the Vale from his poison. Baelish is a viper wrapped in silk. I see what he does, how he gathers coin and men, how he whispers to the Lannisters even as he courts the lords here. You may think yourself safe, but you are a piece upon his board." His words cut deep, for they echoed her own secret thoughts. "What would you have me do?" she asked quietly. Royce stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Help me. Tell me what he plots. You may yet save the Vale, and yourself." She met his gaze, weighing his sincerity. He was proud, honorable, a man of stone and truth. But truth could be more dangerous than lies. "I will think on it," she said. "Do more than think," he urged, "before the snows close the mountain." When she returned to her room, the wind howled through the Ares halls like a living thing. She shut the door behind her and sank onto the bed, her hands shaking. Between Royce's warning and the letter's hidden words, the world around her seemed suddenly fragile, a web of deceit spun so fine it might snap with a breath. She drew out the box again, tracing the carved Gloxinias with her thumb. How long had Lysa kept this secret, fearing the man she loved? And now that secret lay in Sansa's hands. Outside, the snow began to fall harder, sweeping across the moonlit peaks. Somewhere below, a falcon cried, lonely and fierce. Sansa lifted the vial, watching the pale liquid shimmer within. "If I play your game, Petter," she whispered to the dark, "I mean to win." And for the first time, she did not feel afraid. Snow fell thick and silent upon the Eyrie, cloaking its towers and battlements in white. The castle seemed to float amid the clouds, a ghostly citadel untouched by the wars that burned below in the Seven Kingdoms. Yet within its pale walls, the air was heavy with unease. Whispers among servants, footsteps heard where none should be, letters gone missing from the solar. Sansa had learned to move quietly through those marble corridors, the box of Gloxinias hidden beneath a loose flagstone in her chamber floor. Every night, she drew it forth by candlelight to study the letters anew, searching for clues among Lysa Arryn's fevered words. Each line told a story of fear of betrayal, fear of poison, fear of the man who whispered promises into her ear. The more Sansa read, the clearer it became. Petyr Baelish had not only killed her aunt, but had planned it long before the night Lysa was cast through the moon door. And worse, the letters hinted at an alliance beyond the Vale, a secret compact sealed with coin and death. The lion pays in gold, one fragment read. The falcon delivers silence. Lysa had written those words in trembling script. It was a bargain made before Jon Arryn's death, and one Petyr had hidden from all. Sansa knew she should destroy the box, burn the letters, forget what she had seen, but the thought of it filled her with fire. Every deceit Petyr had spoken to her, every tender word and promise, echoed now like a chain clinking shut. He had stolen her name, her freedom, her trust. Now she would steal his secrets. That morning, she went to the kitchens under pretense of fetching bread for the sickly Lord Robert. The smell of spice and smoke filled the vaulted room, and the cooks bowed low as she entered. Maya Stone was there, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, stirring a pot of mulled wine. "Maya," Sansa said softly, "I need a favor." The girl looked up, her dark eyes bright and wary. "For you, my lady, say the word." "I must know what passes in Gulltown. Has any raven flown there from the Eyrie these past 10 days?" Maya frowned. "Aye, one. Lord Baelish sent it himself, sealed in green wax, his seal. Did you see to whom it was sent? Maya shook her head. He gave it to Sir Lothor Brune, said it was for his men at the port. Sansa thanked her, pressing a copper into her hand. As she turned to leave, Maya caught her sleeve. Be careful, my lady. The winds here carry words faster than wings. There's talk in the barracks that Royce means to challenge Lord Baelish before the Lord's declarant. He gathers allies. Sansa's heart quickened. If Royce moved too soon, Baelish would destroy him. And if the Lords uncovered her true name before she was ready, she might share that fate. She spent the afternoon in thought, pacing before her narrow window. Far below, the mists rolled through the valley like ghostly seas. Somewhere out there, hidden by the snow, waited the truth, and the key Lisa had written of. When dusk fell, she went to the solar under pretense of fetching a ledger for Lord Baelish. The room was warm from the hearth, the air heavy with the scent of parchment and ink. Peter's writing desk stood near the window, its surface neat, its drawers locked, but she had watched him enough to know where he hid the key. Behind the carved falcon of the mantelpiece, a small iron hook. She took it, hands steady, and opened the lower drawer. Inside were letters, ledgers, and a small chest bound in green leather. She opened it and gasped. Dozens of letters lay within, sealed with the Lion of Lannister. Her fingers trembled as she broke one open. The words within were short and sharp. The gold is sent by ship, as promised. The Vale must remain silent. You will see to the Falcon's obedience. Signed, T.T. for Tyrion, for Tywin. She did not know, but the meaning was plain enough. Baelish had sold the Vale's loyalty, just as he had sold her family's. A sound outside made her start. Quickly, she replaced the letters, locked the drawer, and slipped the key back behind the mantel. She had just turned when the door opened. Petter stood in the threshold. His smile was thin. You work late, my sweet. Her heart lurched. Lord Robert asked for a storybook. I thought to find one among your papers. Baelish crossed the room slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. A storybook? Among ledgers and letters? My clever girl knows better than that. He stopped so near she could smell the faint scent of lemon oil on his hands. You must not wander where secrets sleep, Elaine. It is a dangerous habit. I meant no harm, my lord. Of course not. His hand brushed her hair, gentle and cold. Still, one must learn when to ask and when to listen. She forced herself to smile. Then perhaps you will tell me one story, my lord. He raised an eyebrow. And what story would that be? The one of how you rose so high. Baelish chuckled, low and soft. Ah, that tale is long and dull. A boy born too low, who learned that gold and whispers cut deeper than swords. But I think you already know that lesson, don't you, my dove? He left her then, his cloak whispering against the floor. But when the door shut, Sansa stood frozen, her pulse wild. He had known she was there. Had he laid a trap? That night she could not sleep. She dreamed of Winterfell buried beneath snow, of her mother's voice calling from a tower window, and of a box of flowers blooming red as blood. When morning came, the Vale had changed. Word spread that Lord Royce had summoned the Lord's declarant to convene within the fortnight. Whispers of treachery moved through the eyrie like smoke. Petter smiled still, but his men watched the gates more closely, and new guards stood outside his chambers. Sansa knew then she must act quickly. If Baelish struck first, Royce would die, and with him, her last ally. That evening she went again to Maya. Can you send a message to Runestone? Maya frowned. In this weather, the ravens may not find the way. They must, Sansa said. "It is for Lord Royce, from a friend." She wrote by candlelight, her hand shaking. "The falcon serves two masters. The proof lies in the Lord Protector's drawer beneath the green chest. Trust only yourself. Burn this when read." When the raven took flight into the storm, she watched it vanish into the gray and prayed the gods of the north still listened to her. Yet even as she prayed, a shadow moved in the corridor outside her door, the sound of a boot scraping stone. She turned sharply, heart hammering. Nothing. Only silence and the faint scent of lemon oil lingering in the air. Sansa blew out her candle and drew the box of Gloxinias close against her breast. "If you mean to play your games, Petter," she whispered, "then so shall I." And beyond the walls, the snow fell heavier, blanketing the area in white, a world of secrets buried under silence. For 3 days, the storm did not cease. Snow and wind howled across the mountain passes, sealing the area from the world below. The sky was a dull, unbroken gray, the kind that made men whisper of omens. Within the castle, fires burned day and night, yet still the cold crept through every crack in the stone, seeping into bone and heart alike. Sansa moved through the keep like a shadow. She spoke little, smiled when spoken to, and listened always. Lord Baelish's courtiers, the lesser knights and maesters, had grown wary and tight-lipped, but fear made even clever tongues loose in the dark. She heard them murmur that the Lords Declarant were gathering at Runestone, that Royce had sent word by Raven, and that Baelish had ordered every tower watch doubled. Each whisper was another thread in a web that bound them all tighter. But it was the second night of the storm when the first sign of danger reached her. A servant boy came to her chamber near dusk, his cloak crusted with snow. "My lady," he said, eyes wide and frightened, "Lord Baelish bids you come to the High Hall, at once." Sansa thanked him, her voice calm though her stomach turned to ice. She hid the box of Gloxinias beneath her cloak and followed the boy through corridors lit by trembling torches. The high hall of the Eyrie was vast and pale, its floor of white marble veined with blue. The great bronze moon door stood open, though barred with iron against the wind. Before it stood Peter Baelish, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak, his hands clasped behind his back. He turned as she entered. "Elaine," he said softly, "how good of you to come. The storm makes the halls so empty." "My lord," she murmured, curtsying, "I sent for you because we must speak plainly." He gestured to the long table where a map of the Vale lay spread. "Lord Royce gathers his banners. He means to strip me of my title, and perhaps my head. It seems my little dove has been whispering to him." The world tilted. "My lord, He raised a hand. "Hush. I do not accuse. I merely observe. You have grown bold of late. Boldness can be a virtue, or a blade turned against its wielder." Sansa forced herself to breathe evenly. "I have done nothing against you." "Nothing?" Baelish's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath. "Letters vanish from my desk. A raven flies from the rookery with no name on its sender. Tell me, Elaine, am I to believe in ghosts?" Her mouth went dry. "If you think me faithless, then why summon me here?" "Because," he said, stepping closer, "I would rather tame a clever bird than clip her wings." His eyes gleamed. Lysa once fancied herself cunning too. She hid her secrets well, or thought she did. Do you know what I found after her death? Her heart stilled. "A box," he said, "carved with flowers, Gloxinias." He smiled then, slow and cruel. "You see, my dove, I know what game you play." Sansa felt the weight of the box beneath her cloak like a brand of fire. She could lie, deny everything. but the look in his eyes told her it would be useless. "You left it for me," she whispered. "Didn't you? You wanted me to find it." Baelish's smile widened. "Ah, at last. You begin to understand. Why? To see what you would do." He turned from her, walking toward the moon door. The wind from beyond it howled like some distant beast. "You remind me of your mother. Fierce, proud, but too honest to win. I would not have that fate for you." She stepped closer, anger trembling through her. "You used her. You killed her sister. You betrayed my father." He turned, eyes glittering like wet slate. "And yet, you live, Sansa Stark. You, who might have died a dozen times over, you live because I made it so." The name struck her like a blow. Sansa Stark, spoken aloud after so long hidden. "My lord, enough lies. We are beyond them now." He moved nearer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "You hold the letters that could damn me. You could give them to Royce, to the Lord's declarant. You could see me hanged from these very walls. But what then? A Stark alone among strangers, with no friends, no power, no name. They would marry you off to some petty lord for the sake of peace, and your life would be spent birthing heirs in a cold castle, while others ruled your fate." He took her hand, his touch light but possessive. "With me, you could be more. The North remembers, but it also forgets. You could rule in truth if only you learned to play the game as I do." Sansa met his gaze, her fear turning slowly to resolve. "And what of Lord Royce?" she asked. "Ah," Baelish said with a sigh. "He rides even now. The storm will delay him, but not forever. When he comes, he will find no proof, no letters, no box, only a faithful daughter who speaks sweetly in her father's defense." He smiled again, as though all were decided. "You will stand beside me, Elaine. You will say what I tell you, and together we shall rule this vale." But in her heart, another thought took root. She saw him not as protector or teacher, but as captor, and herself not as his dove, but as the wolf her mother had raised. When he dismissed her, she walked slowly back through the silent halls, her breath fogging the cold air. The storm's fury battered the windows, yet inside, her thoughts were calm, sharp as drawn glass. That night, she wrote another letter, this one in her own hand. "To the Lord's declarant of the Vale, Peter Baelish plots treason against the Eyrie. Proof lies within his own chest, sealed with green wax. His crimes are the same that doomed House Arryn. I, Sansa Stark, bear witness. She did not seal it with her name. Only the mark of a direwolf scratched upon the corner, the sigil of her house, thought long dead. Then she hid it within the hollow of the Gloxinia box and placed it once more beneath the flagstone. By morning, the storm had broken. The sky was clear, bright as ice. In the courtyard below, men saddled their horses, and Lord Royce's banner, the bronze and black of House Royce, snapped in the wind. Peter Baelish watched from the steps of the keep, his smile calm, untroubled. He spoke to her softly before the gathered knights, his words smooth as silk. "Stay close, Elaine. When the storm passes, you will see that all this bluster means nothing." But as Sansa looked out over the mountains, she saw the glint of sunlight on distant armor, and her heart stirred with something she had not felt in years: hope. The game was his. The move was hers. And somewhere beyond the snowy peaks, the falcons were taking flight. Morning broke with a pale, cold sun, its light sharp as a knife's edge against the snow-drowned mountains. The storm had passed, leaving the world hushed and glimmering. The air was so thin that every sound carried: the clatter of hooves in the courtyard, the murmur of steel, the flutter of banners on the wind. The Vale was awakening. Sansa stood at her window, watching the banners rise. Bronze and blue, white and silver, the sigils of the Lord's Declarant. They were arriving sooner than Baelish had foreseen. She could see the flicker of torches winding up the mountain road far below, an unbroken trail of light climbing through the mist. Her heart pounded as she turned from the view. The Gloxinia box lay upon her table, the wood cold beneath her fingers. She had polished it the night before until the carved flowers gleamed like living things. Within, the hidden letter waited, her last shield, her last blade. A knock came at the door. "My lady?" It was Maya Stone, her voice low. "The Lord's Declarant ride for the Eyrie. Lord Royce leads them. He asks for you by name." Sansa's pulse quickened. "By name?" Maya hesitated. "He said," the girl with her mother's eyes. "He meant you, didn't he?" Sansa gathered her cloak, the thick fur heavy on her shoulders. "Where is Lord Baelish?" "In the High Hall. He means to meet them at the gates." "Then the gods be with us," she whispered. Together, they descended the winding stairs. The halls were full of tension, the air thick with the smell of torches and sweat. Knights stood at the ready, their hands near sword hilts. Even the servants moved with the careful quiet of those who knew danger was near. At the gate of the Eyrie, Lord Petter Baelish waited in his finest cloak, his smile fixed, his manner light. To all eyes, he was still the calm master of the castle, until the gates swung wide and Lord Jan Royce entered with his banners behind him. "Lord Protector," Royce said, his voice cold as stone, "we come seeking answers." "Then enter," Baelish replied smoothly. "The Vale keeps no secrets from her lords." Sansa followed them into the high hall, her heart pounding in her chest. The great chamber was lit by braziers and the pale light from the mountains. The moon door was closed now, but its shadow stretched long across the floor. The Lord's Declarant gathered before the dais, bronze-armored Royce of Runestone, Lord Belmore of Strong Song, pale and stern, young Sir Benedar of the Gates of the Moon, his hand upon his sword. Baelish regarded them all as a cat might a room of drowsing mice. "My lords," he began, "you ride through storm and snow to my door. I can only hope your business is urgent indeed." Royce stepped forward. "It is urgent. We have had word, letters sent in secret, accusations of treason, of alliance with the Lannisters." The hall stirred. Baelish's smile did not waver. "Letters? Ah, the Vale breeds such gossip. I would hear these claims in full, if you please." Royce's eyes swept the chamber, then settled on Sansa. "The letter came from one who names herself Witness. She spoke of a chest of green leather, of a seal of gold and a falcon's betrayal. You know what I speak of, Lord Baelish." Baelish's gaze flickered just once. Then he laughed softly. "A chest? My dear Royce, if I kept a chest for every rumor born of this castle, the Eyrie would have no room for its walls. Surely you do not mean to judge me by whispers." Royce's hand dropped to the hilt of his sword. "You have played the Vale for a fool long enough. We will search your chambers. If you are innocent, you will have nothing to fear." Sansa felt the air change, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. Baelish stepped down from the dais, his tone suddenly sharp. "You forget yourself, my lord. I am the Lord Protector, chosen by the council and sworn to guard the boy, Robert Arryn. You would unseat me upon the word of a phantom? No, I think not." He turned to Sansa then, his eyes cold and cutting. "Elaine, tell them what you have seen. Tell them I have done nothing to harm this house." The hall was silent. Every eye turned toward her. She could feel the weight of the box hidden beneath her cloak, The Gloxinias pressed against her ribs like tiny carved ghosts. "My lords," she said softly, "I am Elaine Stone. I know little of politics and less of treason, but I know what I've seen." Baelish's expression flickered, the briefest crack. "Speak," Royce commanded. Sansa drew the box from beneath her cloak and set it upon the table. The carved flowers caught the firelight. "This belonged to Lady Lysa Arryn. She left it hidden in the vaults below the solar. Inside are letters, and a vial, like the one that killed her. I found it myself." The murmur that rose in the hall was low and dangerous. Baelish's composure frayed for the first time. "You foolish girl," he hissed, too low for the others to hear. "You play at games you do not understand." But she raised her voice for all to hear. "There are letters written by Lady Lysa's own hand, naming her fear, and naming Lord Baelish as the one who brought the poison to her." "Lies," Baelish snapped. "The girl is confused. I have cared for her as a daughter." Royce slammed his hand upon the table. "Enough. We will see the letters." Sansa opened the box. Within lay the parchments bound in blue ribbon and the small glass vial, cloudy and pale as moonlight. The Maester took them and began to read aloud, his voice trembling. Each word fell like a stone into the silence. Lysa's pleas, her terror, her talk of betrayal and poison. When he finished, the hall erupted in shouts. Baelish's face was a mask, calm, but his eyes blazed. "You think this proves anything? A madwoman's ravings?" Royce turned to him. "It proves enough. Guards, take him." Steel rang. Baelish moved swiftly, drawing a dagger from his sleeve, but the knights closed on him before he could strike. Sansa stepped back, heart pounding, as they seized his arms and forced him to his knees. Even bound, he smiled at her. "Well played, my sweet. You have learned more from me than I guessed." "I learned enough," she said quietly. He leaned closer as the guards dragged him away. "Remember this, Sansa Stark. The game does not end with me. Every victory breeds a greater enemy." Then he was gone, the echo of his boots fading down the hall. The Lords Declarants spoke in low voices, their faces grave. The poison, the letters, the falsehoods, all would need proof and trial. But for now, Baelish's rule was ended. As they dispersed, Lord Royce approached her. "You have done a brave thing," he said, "and a dangerous one. The Vale owes you more than it knows." Sansa bowed her head. "I did what was right." "Right is not always safe," Royce said softly. "Be wary, my lady. The falcon's nest holds many snakes." When she was alone at last, Sansa climbed to the terrace overlooking the snowbound valley. The sky was fading to dusk, the air biting cold. Below, the torches of the departing lords glimmered like stars upon the white mountains. She held the Gloxinia box in her hands. The flowers, once carved in secrecy, now seemed symbols of something else, of endings and beginnings, of truth wrested from deceit. She opened it one last time. Inside lay only the letter she had written, the mark of the direwolf, still smudged, but clear. She smiled faintly, then dropped the box into the deep snow below, where it vanished without sound. The wind rose around her, cold and fierce, tugging at her hair. Somewhere in the distance, a falcon cried, and Sansa Stark, daughter of Winterfell, stood upon the heights of the Eyrie and felt, for the first time, that she had truly begun to rule her own fate. The snows deepened in the days that followed, swallowing the mountain roads and muffling the sound of hoof and bell. The Lords Declarant departed one by one, taking their banners back to the lowlands where the cold was gentler. Only Lord Royce remained, For the boy, Robert Arryn, was frail and frightened, and someone had to govern the Vale while the lords debated the fate of Peter Baelish. They had carried Baelish away in chains to the gates of the moon to await trial when the passes thawed. Yet his name still lingered like smoke through the halls of the Eyrie, and his shadow stretched long in Sansa's mind. In the mornings, she helped Maester Coleman tend to young Lord Robert, whose fits had grown worse since the storm. The boy wept often, begging for Peter's return, clutching at her skirts like a child half his age. She soothed him with stories of falcons and heroes, of the knights of the Vale and their victories long ago. He would calm at her voice, though his small hands trembled. At night, she walked the silent corridors, her steps soft against the cold stone. The castle felt emptier without Baelish's schemes whispering through it. Yet peace did not sit easily upon her. The Vale was safe for the moment, but her own safety was still uncertain. Too many had seen her face that day in the hall. Too many had heard the name she'd tried to bury. Sansa Stark. The name felt both strange and sacred now, a ghost returning after long silence. She would whisper it when alone, testing its weight. Sansa Stark of Winterfell. It stirred both pride and fear. The North might yet live within her, but she was far from its hearth. One evening, Lord Royce joined her upon the terrace. The snows had softened to a quiet drift, and the air smelled of frost and pine. He wore a thick cloak of bronze wool, his beard rimed with silver. "My lady," he said, bowing his head, "you keep late hours." "I find it hard to sleep," she replied. "The Eyrie feels too still." Royce nodded. "Peace unsettles those who have known too much chaos. It is the curse of survivors." They stood in silence for a time, gazing out at the moonlit peaks. At last he said, "Word has come from the Vale's council. They will not hang Baelish yet. He will stand trial when the mountain passes open. His tongue is quick, and some still call him innocent. You should be prepared for his lies." "I am," she said quietly. Royce looked at her long, his breath misting in the air. "You were brave to speak as you did, but courage brings danger. You unmasked a serpent, my lady, and serpents do not die easily. Baelish's allies may yet move against you. It may be wise to leave the Eyrie, at least until the trial." "Leave?" The thought chilled her more than the wind. "Where would I go?" "Runestone, if you wish, or to the Fingers. There are ships that could bear you north when the seas thaw." He studied her face. "You are a Stark. You deserve to be among your own." Her throat tightened. "The North is lost to me. The Boltons hold Winterfell." "Winterfell is a castle," Royce said firmly. "The North is its people. The blood of the first men flows in your veins. Do not forget that." His words struck deep, yet she knew the danger of hope. The world she had known was gone, her father dead, her mother, her brothers. To dream of returning was to risk heartbreak anew. Still, that night, as she lay awake, she thought of the North. She remembered the smell of pine and smoke, the sound of wolves howling beyond the walls, the feel of snow not as prison, but as promise. The next day brought strange tidings. A raven arrived from Gulltown, its wings rimmed with frost. The maester brought the scroll to her in the solar, his hands trembling slightly. "A message for you, my lady," he said. "For me?" The seal bears no name, but it was addressed to the Lady of Flowers and Snow. She felt a shiver at the words. Carefully, she broke the wax. The parchment within was small, the ink pale and precise. "The game never ends, my sweet. Pieces move even in silence. Trust no one who smiles too easily, not even the ones who wear bronze. When the falcon flies again, look to the valley below. It was unsigned, but she knew the hand. Baelish. Her heart pounded. The letter was a threat, or a warning, or both. Somehow, from his cell, he had managed to send it. That meant he still had allies within the Vale. She burned the parchment in the brazier, watching the fire curl its edges to ash. Yet the words would not leave her mind. That evening, Maya Stone found her walking the gallery. "My lady," Maya whispered, "there's trouble at the stables. One of the guards was found dead near the gate. No mark on him, only foam at the mouth. Poison." The word hung unspoken between them. Sansa's blood turned to ice. "Who found him?" "A boy from the kitchens. Said he saw a man slipping through the yard before dawn, cloaked, hooded, couldn't see his face." "Tell Lord Royce at once," Sansa said. But before the message could be carried, more chaos erupted. A second man fell ill that night, one of Royce's own guards, and the Maester swore it was poison again, the same faint milky sheen upon the lips. By dawn, fear had returned to the Eyrie. Men whispered that Baelish had left noose-tight curses behind him, that his servants were still among them. Royce summoned Sansa to the council chamber. He stood over the table where maps lay spread, his face grim. "This is no accident," he said. "Baelish's hand reaches farther than we thought. What will you do?" "I will send word to the gates of the moon. If he commands this from his cell, he must be silenced, one way or another." But Sansa felt the weight of the unseen enemy pressing close. She thought of the letter's words. "Look to the valley below." That night, she took a lantern and climbed the narrow steps to the rookery. The wind tore at her cloak, the cold biting through her gloves. From the tower, she could see the valley far beneath, pale under the moon, streaked with shadow. And there, along the winding path that led toward Gulltown, she saw lights. Torches, perhaps a dozen of them, moving swiftly upward. Men were coming. She descended the steps 2 at a time and found Maya waiting below. "How many riders can you muster?" Sansa demanded. "A handful," Maya said. "Why?" "Because someone is coming for us." The alarm bells sounded before dawn. By the time the gates closed, the riders were already visible through the fog, cloaked in gray and black, their banners hidden, their numbers unknown. They made no attack, only encamped at the foot of the mountain, their fires burning red in the snow. Royce ordered the guards doubled and the gates barred. But Sansa knew this was no mere raid. Someone had sent them, and she feared she knew who. In her chamber, she stared once more at the cold, empty place where the Gloxinia box had once lain. She had thrown it into the snow, believing the game ended. Now she wondered if she had only set another piece in motion. Outside, the falcons wheeled and screamed against the gray sky, their cries echoing through the peaks like a warning from the gods. Sansa clenched her hands upon the windowsill. "If this is your game, Peter," she whispered to the wind, "then I will play it still. But I swear to you, this time it will end in blood." And far below, beyond the white mists of the valley, the torches burned brighter. The days that followed were wrapped in unease. The riders camped below the Eyrie did not move to attack, yet neither did they retreat. Their fires burned each night like a circle of eyes watching from the darkness, their banners still hidden. The mountain winds carried faint sounds up the slopes, the clatter of armor, the stamping of horses, and sometimes, when the night was very still, Sansa thought she heard laughter. Lord Royce sent scouts down the treacherous paths to learn who they were, but none returned. The Vale Knights grew restless, muttering of sorcery and ghosts. The Eyrie had always felt more a temple of air than a fortress, but now even its high walls seemed too near, too fragile. Sansa took to walking the galleries at dusk, her thoughts heavy. The letter's words haunted her still. When the falcon flies again, look to the valley below. Baelish's message had been more than taunt. It had been warning, prophecy, or trap. Yet what did it mean? One afternoon she found Maya in the courtyard, tightening the girth on her mare. "You mean to ride?" Sansa asked. "Aye," Maya replied. "Lord Royce sent word to close the lower way castle, but I'll not sit idle while strangers stalk the vale. If there's a hidden path they use, I'll find it." Sansa hesitated, then said, "Take care, Maya. These men, they move like shadows." Maya grinned, though there was unease behind it. "I've hunted shadows all my life, my lady. They bleed same as men." She rode out before dusk, a dozen guards at her back. That night, the mountain was eerily still. The snow had ceased, and the stars shone sharp and cold. Sansa sat in her chamber, the fire low, trying to calm her thoughts, but when the hour grew late, the silence broke. A horn call, distant but clear, echoing through the passes. Then another, closer. She ran to the window. Far below, torchlight flared along the ridge. Too many torches, moving too swiftly. The alarm bells sounded. By the time Sansa reached the hall, Lord Royce was already there, armor half-buckled, his sword bare. "They've breached the lower way castle," he barked. 200 men at least, archers to the walls. "Who are they?" Sansa asked. Royce's face was grim. No banners shone, but they come from the east road, from Gulltown. Her blood ran cold. Gulltown, the port Baelish had long controlled. The first arrows hissed through the air, striking the outer gates. The mountain echoed with shouts and steel. The defenders loosed volleys in return, but the enemy pressed upward, swift and organized. Sansa stood at the balcony, watching sparks leap from the snow where blades clashed. The Ares' narrow path, the stone's narrow way, had always been its defense. A single rider could hold it against 50. Yet somehow, the attackers were climbing in silence, using hooks and ropes to scale the cliffs. Royce's men fought valiantly, but the enemy moved with uncanny precision, vanishing into the mist, then reappearing behind them. A scream cut through the din. Maya Stone's voice. Sansa's heart leapt. She rushed to the parapet, peering down. Below, among the torches, she saw a riderless horse bolt through the ranks. A moment later, a body was flung into the snow. Dark hair, a flash of steel. "Maya," Sansa whispered. Royce pulled her back. "Inside! Now!" They barred the heavy doors of the high hall. Only a handful of knights remained within. Lord Robert sobbed in his chair, clutching his doll. "Make them go away!" he wailed. "Make them stop!" Sansa knelt beside him, forcing calm into her voice. "Hush, sweetling. The knights of the Vale will protect us." But even as she spoke, the doors shuddered under the blows from outside. Royce turned to her. "If they breach the hall, take the boy through the servants' passage. It leads to the rookery tower. From there, the falcon stair opens to the sky. The only way they'll reach you is by flight. And you? I'll hold the gate." He smiled grimly. Bronze Jan Royce has stood against worse odds. He clasped her shoulder once, then strode to the door, sword gleaming in the firelight. The next moments were chaos, shouts, the crash of steel, the splintering of oak. The doors burst inward, and men poured through, cloaked in black and gray, faces hidden by masks. Royce met them with a roar, his blade cleaving the first man clean through. Sansa dragged Robert toward the stair, her breath ragged. The boy stumbled, sobbing, but she pulled him on. Behind her, the clash of battle filled the hall. They reached the tower just as the fighting reached the upper steps. The rookery was cold and silent, the falcons restless in their cages. Sansa slammed the door shut, wedging a chair beneath the handle. "Stay here," she told Robert. "No matter what happens, do not move." "But Elaine, I am not Elaine," she said, meeting his wide, tearful eyes. "I am Sansa Stark. Remember that name." She turned to the window. Below, the fires of battle burned across the snow. The Ares defenders were few now, their shouts fading. She searched the dark for any sign of Maya. Nothing. Then came a sound at the door, a soft, deliberate knock. "Open, my lady," said a voice she knew too well. Smooth, calm, almost tender. Baelish, her knees weakened. "You should be dead," she whispered. "Dead men make the best allies," came the reply. "You didn't think I'd let you win so easily, did you?" She could hear the faint creak of wood as he leaned upon the door. "You play well, Sansa. You turned the veil against me, even sent me to my cell. But while you slept in your high tower, I bought new friends and reminded the old where their loyalties lie. Open the door and I'll forgive you." She laughed then, though her voice shook. "Forgive me? You murdered my kin. You lied and poisoned and schemed, and you think I'll yield?" His tone hardened. "You forget who taught you this game." The chair beneath the handle shuddered as he struck the door. Once, twice. The wood splintered. Sansa backed toward the open window. The cold wind tore at her hair. Below, the valley fell away into endless white mist. "Come out, my sweet," Baelish called. "You've nowhere left to run." She glanced at the falcons' cages, sleek, fierce birds with sharp eyes. "When the falcon flies again," he had written. Sansa flung open a cage. The bird screamed and launched into the night, wings slicing the air. Another followed, then another. When the door burst inward, Peter Baelish stepped through, blood upon his sleeve, his smile undiminished. "You truly have grown bold," he said. "But this ends here." Sansa met his gaze. "Yes," she said softly, "it does." Then she reached for the lever that opened the rookery's outer gate, the falcon's stare, a sheer drop through open sky. The wind howled as she pulled it. Baelish's smile faltered. "Sansa!" She stepped aside as the floor gave way. The air roared, the torches flared. For one instant he hung there, arms outstretched as if pleading. Then he fell, his scream torn away by the wind. The falcons wheeled above, crying to the storm. Sansa stood trembling, the boy clinging to her arm, and whispered a prayer to gods old and new. Below, the fires dimmed. The mountain grew quiet, and as dawn broke over the vale, the snow gleamed red where the falcons fed. When dawn at last broke over the high peaks, the Eyrie lay shrouded in a silence that seemed almost sacred. The storm of men and steel had passed, leaving only smoke, blood, and snow. The courtyard was strewn with the fallen, both the masked invaders and the Vale Knights who had died defending their home. The sun rose slow and red through the mists, casting long shadows across the marble steps where Lord Jon Roy stood amid his men. His sword was dark with dried blood, his cloak torn, yet his voice was steady as he gave orders to the survivors. "Gather the wounded, burn the dead," he said. "We will not leave them to rot in the cold." Above them, from the rookery tower, Sansa watched. Her hair was tangled, her gown torn at the sleeve, and the mountain wind stung her eyes, but she did not look away. Somewhere below, beyond the gate and the shattered stair, Petyr Baelish lay broken upon the rocks. His body would never be found. The mountain would claim him as it claimed all who fell from its heights. And yet she felt no triumph. Only weariness, vast and deep as the snowfields. The boy Robert still clung to her side, shivering though the sun had risen. His small hands were cold in hers. Is he gone? He whispered. Yes, Sansa said softly. He won't come back. Royce climbed the tower steps soon after, his men close behind. He bowed low when he saw her, though the motion looked awkward on one so proud. My lady, he said, it's done. The area is safe again, though at great cost. Half our men are lost, and Maya Stone among them. Sansa lowered her gaze. Maya's laughter still echoed faintly in her memory, bright and wild. She was brave, Sansa murmured. That she was, Royce said. She fought to the end. I will see she's remembered with honor. He studied her face for a moment, then added quietly, Word will spread quickly. The lords of the Vale will want to know how this came to pass, how Baelish raised his men again from exile, how he reached the Eyrie itself, and they'll ask what part you played. I did what I had to, she said simply. That may not be enough for them. Sansa met his gaze, her voice steady. Then let them come. I am done hiding. Royce inclined his head, a faint smile beneath his beard. Spoken like your mother. The day wore on as the dead were gathered. Fires burned in the courtyard until dusk, their smoke winding upward like pale ghosts. The air smelled of pine and ash. Sansa stood beside the pyres with Lord Royce when the flames were lit, her cloak drawn close. She spoke no words for Baelish. The mountain had already taken him. No prayer could change his fate now. When the last of the fires died, she returned to her chamber. The walls felt unfamiliar now, stripped of their shadows and secrets. The chair she had used to bar the door still lay overturned, its legs splintered. On her table rested a single falcon feather, white as frost. It must have fallen from one of the birds that had burst from the rookery at dawn. She held it for a long while, turning it in the firelight. Then she took up her quill. To the lords of the Vale she wrote, I am Sansa Stark, daughter of Eddard and Catelyn of Winterfell. You have known me by another name, but I will hide it no longer. Petyr Baelish deceived us all. He brought poison, lies, and treason into this house, and I have seen it ended. The Vale stands free again. Let the lords judge me as they will, but know that I have spoken the truth. She sealed the letter with wax and pressed into it a small coin she carried still, a token once given to her by Baelish himself, bearing the mockingbird's sigil. She left it there, trapped forever in the red wax as both confession and warning. When morning came, the ravens flew. By the third day, word had reached Runestone and Strongsong. Messengers rode hard through the passes, bearing tidings of Baelish's fall and the Stark girl's survival. Some called her murderer, others savior. But whatever the lords thought, none dared move against her yet. The Vale had little stomach left for bloodshed. Robert Arryn, pale and trembling, refused to eat for a time, crying often for the man who had once called himself his friend. Yet, as the days passed, he grew calmer under Sansa's care. She sang to him softly in the evenings, old northern songs her mother had loved, songs of snow and home. The maester said the boy's health was failing, but when she sang, he smiled. You sound like my mother, he told her once, eyes heavy with sleep. She smiled faintly. Then perhaps that's enough. It was Lord Royce who first spoke of what should come next. The Vale cannot stand leaderless, he said one night as they met in the solar. The lords will gather soon. They will name a new protector until young Robert comes of age. I'll speak for you if you wish it. The people already call you the Lady of the Eyrie. Sansa's eyes widened. Me? Royce nodded. You held this castle when no one else could. You ended the man who poisoned our peace. If that does not make you its lady, what does? She hesitated. "I am no Aaron. The Vale will not accept a northerner as its ruler." "They will if you give them reason," he said. "Baelish ruled by deceit. Rule by something stronger. Truth, perhaps, or courage. The Vale needs both." She looked down at her hands, slender and pale against the dark wood of the table. "I only wanted to survive," she said. Royce's eyes softened. "Then you've learned what most rulers never do. That survival is its own kind of rule." He left her then, his cloak trailing behind him like shadow. That night, sleep did not come easily. Sansa stood again at the window, staring out across the endless whiteness of the mountains. The stars burned sharp above, and the wind sang through the stones, a song older than any lord or king. Below, the falcons wheeled above the cliffs, their cries echoing faint and fierce. She thought of the Gloxinia box, buried beneath the snow somewhere on that same mountainside. Its secrets had been her beginning, and her curse. Perhaps it still lay there, or perhaps the storm had carried it away. She pressed her hand to the cold glass. "You played your game well, Peter," she whispered, "but this board is mine now." Then she turned from the window, drew her cloak about her shoulders, and went down to the hall where the banners of the Vale hung. There, beneath the moonlight, she knelt before the falcon sigil. "I am Sansa Stark of Winterfell," she said aloud, her voice steady and clear, "and I will not be a pawn again." The torches flickered, and for a moment it seemed the falcon above her stirred upon the cloth, wings outstretched in silent flight. When she rose, the first light of dawn was breaking, gilding the peaks in gold. A new day had come to the Vale, and to Sansa Stark. The Vale of Arryn lay quiet beneath its shroud of winter. The mountains glittered under the pale sun, their peaks sharp as crown points, and the air was so still that one could almost believe the war and treachery of the past moon, a dream half remembered. Yet within the high halls of the Eyrie, change moved like unseen fire beneath the snow. Sansa Stark, though she had reclaimed her name, had not yet found peace. The lords of the Vale were slow to trust and slower still to forget. Each morning brought ravens bearing words wrapped in courtesy but steeped in caution. Letters from Runestone, from Strongsong, from the gates of the moon. Some called her savior, others usurper, and every letter ended the same way. "We await the council." That council would gather within a fortnight to decide the fate of the Vale, and her own. Until then, she ruled as caretaker, overseeing the wounded, the rebuilding, and the frail young lord who whimpered for his mother in the long nights. Lord Robert's health waned with the cold. His fits came more often now, and when they passed, he was left weak as a reed. Sometimes he would look at her with clouded eyes and ask, "Will Peter come back?" Sansa would smile and stroke his hair. "No, sweetling, he's gone where none can follow." But after, when she was alone, she could not keep from wondering whether that was true. Men like Petyr Baelish did not vanish easily. The mountain had swallowed his body, but she had learned too well that his reach had always gone deeper than any root or stone. One evening, as dusk bled into night, she went walking upon the terrace to clear her thoughts. The sky was painted gold and violet, and far below, mist filled the valley like a sea. The wind carried the cries of the falcons nesting on the cliffs. Their wings glimmered silver in the fading light, and for the first time since the battle, she found comfort in their wild, lonely song. Royce found her there. His beard was newly shorn, his armor mended, yet his eyes were weary. "You should not walk alone," he said. "The snows hide more than foxes." "I've walked with ghosts too long to fear them now," she replied. He stood beside her, his gaze following hers to the valley. The lords will come soon. You should be ready for what they'll demand. I know, she said. They will want a confession, or a queen to kneel to. I can give them neither. Then give them something greater. Sansa turned to him. What could be greater than peace? Purpose, Royce said. You've shown them courage. Show them wisdom, and they will follow you. His faith stirred something in her chest. Pride, perhaps, or the faint ember of hope. Yet before she could answer, a cry rang out from the courtyard below. Rider from the north! They hurried down the stair, cloaks billowing. At the gate stood a horse and a man cloaked in ice and road dust, his banner half frozen but still visible in the torchlight. The dire wolf of House Stark, white upon gray. Sansa's breath caught. The rider dismounted, unfastened his hood, and knelt. My lady, he said, his voice hoarse. I come from Castle Black, by way of the Dread Fort and the Fingers. I bring word from the north, and from your brother. Jon? Her voice trembled on the name. The man nodded. Lord Commander no longer. He's king in the north now, by the acclamation of the northern lords. The words struck her like a storm wind. For a moment, she could not speak. Jon alive, not merely alive, but crowned, ruling their father's land. It was too vast a thought to grasp. What message does he send? She managed. The rider drew a parchment from his cloak, sealed in black wax stamped with the direwolf. She broke it with shaking fingers. Sansa, if this finds you, know that Winterfell is ours again. The Boltons are dead, and the North remembers its name. The snows still fall, but our hearts burn bright. Come home if you can. The pack is not whole without you. Jon. The letter blurred before her eyes. She clutched it to her breast, the air thick in her throat. Royce watched her in silence, his stern face softening. The gods are kind, he said quietly. You have a family still. A family, she whispered, the word strange and sweet upon her tongue. That night she did not sleep. She walked the length of the Ares halls, her thoughts a whirl of memory and longing. Winterfell rose in her mind. The gray towers, the steaming hot springs, the laughter of children now gone. The north called to her, wild and distant, and the pull of it was stronger than fear. But the Vale still needed her, its knights, its boy lord, its uncertain peace. Could she leave them now, when her name alone held the walls together? At dawn, she went to the sept, lighting a candle for the dead. The flame flickered, throwing long shadows across the marble floor. She knelt and prayed, not for guidance, for the gods had long been silent, but for strength to choose rightly. When she rose, she found Royce waiting in the doorway. I know what you are thinking, he said, and if it were my choice, I would see you go. The north is your blood. But the Vale is my duty, she replied. Duty changes, Royce said, but blood does not. She looked past him, out to the mountains gilded by sunrise. If I leave, Robert will be alone, and the lords will tear this land apart once more. Then take their oaths before you go, he said. Bind them to peace. Let them swear by the Ares stone and the falcon's flight. Leave them your voice, even if not your hand. The thought took root. For the first time, the path before her seemed clear. A week later, the Lords Declarant gathered once more in the High Hall. The great chamber was hung with banners, the crescent moon of Arryn, the bronze discs of Royce, the silver bells of Belmore. The boy Robert sat upon the high seat, pale and trembling, with Sansa standing beside him. She wore a gown of white wool trimmed with silver, and her hair, no longer dyed, shone auburn in the torchlight. When she spoke, her voice carried across the hall like the clear toll of a bell. "My lords," she said, "the storm has passed, but the mountain stands. Peter Baelish is dead, and his lies with him. Yet peace is fragile, and I will not see the veil torn again by mistrust. I ask you not for allegiance, but for unity." The lords murmured among themselves. Lord Belmore rose. "And what of you, Lady Stark? Will you rule in the boy's stead?" She smiled faintly. "No. My place lies elsewhere, in the north, where my brother calls. But I would leave the Vale under the charge of men who remember honor before ambition." Royce stepped forward then, his bronze armor gleaming. "You have my oath, Lady Stark. The Vale shall hold true, in your name and in its own." One by one, the other lords bent the knee, swearing to protect Robert Arryn and the peace she had bought with blood. When it was done, Sansa turned to the boy. "You will make a fine lord one day," she told him softly. "Remember what I've taught you. Kindness where you can, courage where you must." Robert sniffled and took her hand. "Will you come back?" She smiled and brushed a curl from his brow. "If the winds are kind." 2 days later, beneath a sky of drifting snow, she rode from the Eyrie with a small escort, Royce among them, and the rider from Castle Black, who would guide her north. The pass wound steep and narrow, the air sharp with ice. Halfway down the mountain, she turned once to look back. The Eyrie stood high above, white and distant, its towers like shards of frozen light. "Farewell, little dove," she whispered, though whether she spoke to the castle or the ghost of Petyr Baelish, she could not tell. Then she faced north, toward the unseen land of her birth. The road was long, the snows deep, and the fate that awaited her uncertain. But she no longer feared what lay ahead. For the first time in years, Sansa Stark was going home. The road down from the Eyrie wound like a white serpent through the mountains. Snow lay thick upon the stones, and the air was thin and sharp, burning in the lungs with every breath. Sansa rode at the head of the small company that bore her northward, Lord Royce beside her, a dozen men of the Vale behind, and the rider from Castle Black who had brought her brother's message leading the way. It had been years since she had last looked upon the world beyond the Vale's walls. To her eyes, even the bleak passes seemed vast and wild, beautiful in their loneliness. The wind cut through her furs, but she did not mind. After so long in captivity of names and masks, the cold felt honest. Below them, the valleys lay veiled in mist. Frozen rivers wound through them like pale ribbons, and far beyond the ridges, where the snow met the sky, she imagined the north waiting. Dark forests and broken keeps, the hearth fires of Winterfell burning against the endless winter. They camped that night in the shelter of a crag. The men built a fire from dry pine brought down by the wind, and the smoke rose straight into the star-flecked dark. Sansa sat wrapped in her cloak, the letter from Jon folded in her hands. She had read it a dozen times already, yet still she traced the words with her fingers as if they might vanish if she did not hold them fast. Royce joined her, lowering himself stiffly onto a stone beside the fire. "You should rest," he said. "Tomorrow we cross the lower Vale. The roads there are worse than they look." "I will," she promised, though she knew sleep would not come easily. Her thoughts wandered north again, to Jon, to Winterfell, to the faces she feared she would not know. Royce followed her gaze toward the stars. "Strange, isn't it?" he said. "All these years of war, and the world still turns. The snows fall, the winds blow, and men still chase crowns they cannot keep. Sansa smiled faintly. Perhaps the gods tire of watching us repeat our follies. Then they must be weary indeed. He studied her face, his eyes reflecting the firelight. You remind me of your mother more with every passing day. Catelyn had that same look, hope and steel together. She taught me both, Sansa said softly, but I had to learn the rest on my own. Royce inclined his head, approving. You'll do well in the north. They'll follow you, if your brother is wise enough to see it. She looked into the flames. He'll see. The next morning dawned gray and bitter. Snow fell thick again, muffling the world in silence. They rode hard through the narrow pass, the horses struggling in the drifts. Once, they passed a burned watchtower, its stones blackened, its banners gone. The rider from Castle Black muttered that raiders had been seen along the mountain roads, deserters from the wars below. By midday, they reached the lower vale, where the land widened and the air grew easier to breathe. Pines lined the slopes, their branches heavy with snow. They had just begun to make camp when one of Royce's men shouted from the ridge, "Riders! Coming fast!" The company formed ranks, hands to hilts, but the approaching figures bore no weapon raised. When they came near, Sansa saw the white direwolf stitched upon their cloaks. "Northmen," Royce said, his hand easing from his sword. The riders halted before them, their leader dismounting, a woman tall and broad-shouldered, her face wind-burned but fierce. "Lady Sansa?" she called. "I am she," Sansa answered. The woman knelt. "I am Lyanna Mormont of Bear Island. The king in the north sent us to find you. We heard you lived, but I swore I'd see it with my own eyes." Sansa blinked, stunned. Lyanna was scarcely more than a child, yet she carried herself like a seasoned captain. "You came all this way?" "I came because the north remembers," Lyanna said, "and because family should be together when the snows deepen." Sansa felt her throat tighten. She dismounted and clasped the girl's arm. "Then you are welcome, Lady Mormont. You and your men." They traveled together after that, their numbers doubling. The Northmen moved with a grim efficiency, born of hard winters and harder wars. They spoke little, but their eyes softened when they looked at her, as if she carried with her something sacred, the last flame of Winterfell brought home. By the 5th day, the land began to change. The air grew heavier, filled with the scent of pine and earth. The mountains gave way to rolling hills, and soon they saw the first frozen river of the north, winding silver beneath the sky. That night, Lyanna joined her by the fire. "He'll be glad to see you," she said, without looking up from the whetstone in her hands. "Jon Snow, your brother, though the gods made him bastard. He's fought for every inch of ground, for every man who follows him. Some call him the Wolf Returned." Sansa smiled faintly. "He was always stubborn." "Aye," Lyanna said, glancing up. "Stubborn enough to fight the dead if they came for him. He'll need you, Lady Stark. The north is not what it was. Too many graves, too many ghosts." Sansa looked toward the horizon, where the faint outline of distant woods lay black against the snow. Then perhaps it's time someone remembered how to make the north live again. Lyanna grinned. Spoken like a Mormont. 2 weeks after leaving the Eyrie, they crossed into the north proper. The old stone marker still stood at the border, half buried in frost, its carving faint. Here, the kings of winter ruled. Sansa dismounted and knelt before it, pressing her palm to the ancient stone. "I'm home," she whispered. The road beyond led through the Wolfswood, dark and deep. Ravens followed them in silence, their wings black against the pale sky. At last, as dusk fell on the 7th day, They saw it, Winterfell. It rose from the snows like a memory reborn, its walls rebuilt, its towers crowned with smoke from the great hall's fires. The banners of House Stark hung once more above the gate, the direwolf rippling in the wind. Her heart clenched at the sight. The last time she had seen her home, it had been aflame, its stones blackened by betrayal. Now it stood proud again, and whole. The gates opened as they approached. Men lined the walls, torches blazing. And there, upon the steps of the great hall, stood Jon. He looked older than she remembered, his face leaner, his hair touched with frost, but his eyes were the same, dark, steady, and full of the north. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he stepped forward, and she was running, the snow flying beneath her boots. He caught her in his arms, and the years between them melted away. "Sansa," he murmured. "Jon." They stood together beneath the falling snow, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she felt safe. Behind them, the men cheered. The gates of Winterfell closed, and the fires burned bright against the night. But as Sansa lifted her head from her brother's shoulder, she saw beyond the walls, northward, toward the pale sky, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. The snows were deepening, yes, but the wind carried a strange sound from beyond the woods, low and distant. It sounded almost like howling. And though she was home, Sansa Stark knew the Game of Thrones was far from over. Snow fell thick upon the battlements of Winterfell, softening the black stone and silvering the ancient towers. It drifted through the courtyard where torches burned low, and the smell of smoke and pine filled the air. To Sansa, it felt as though the castle itself breathed again, wounded, scarred, but alive. 3 days had passed since her return. She had walked the walls each morning with Jon at her side, speaking little. Words seemed small beside all that had been lost and found again. Yet silence between them was no longer heavy. It was the silence of kin who had endured the same storms and knew that some wounds were too deep for speech. The great hall had been restored, though its roof still bore the marks of fire. That evening, the banners of House Stark hung high once more, their direwolf sigil rippling above the long tables. The lords of the north had gathered, the Umbers, the Glovers, the Manderleys, the Karstarks, all come to see the Lady of Winterfell returned. Sansa entered the hall dressed in gray wool and white fur, her hair braided in the fashion her mother once wore. The murmur of voices stilled as she passed. Some of the men bowed their heads, others only watched, wary and wondering. Jon sat upon the dais at the far end, not upon a throne, but a simple chair carved of oak, the crown of the north resting upon the table beside him. When she reached him, he rose to meet her. "My sister," he said, and his voice carried through the hall, clear as the toll of steel. "The north remembers the blood of its house. Tonight, Winterfell welcomes her lady home." A cheer rose, rough and strong, echoing off the stone walls. For the first time in many years, Sansa felt warmth that no fire could give. Later, as the feast began, she sat beside Jon, listening as the lords spoke of raids along the eastern coast, of ships seen sailing the shivering sea, of shadows moving beyond the wall. The words were grim, yet there was something steady in the men's voices now, resolve rather than fear. The north had been broken, but it was not beaten. When the hall grew loud with laughter and drink, Sansa slipped away. She walked through the corridors of the keep, tracing her fingers along the old stones, remembering. Here, she had played as a child with Bran and Arya. Here, she had watched her father smile beside the hearth. It felt as though ghosts walked beside her, yet their presence did not frighten her. They were part of the home she had lost and reclaimed. In the godswood, the heart tree waited beneath its blanket of snow, the red leaves whispering faintly in the wind. Sansa knelt before it, the cold seeping through her furs. "Father," she whispered. "Mother, I am home. But the world is not as it was. I fear what lies ahead." The weirwood did not answer, but the stillness of the grove felt almost like listening. A crunch of footsteps broke the silence. Jon stood at the edge of the clearing, his cloak dusted white. "You always came here when you were frightened," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "And you always followed, even when I told you not to." "I was never good at doing what I was told." They stood together beneath the red boughs, the snow drifting between them. "I meant what I said," Jon murmured. "The North remembers. You've done more than any sword could. You survived Baelish, the Lannisters, the wars of the South. You kept our name alive when all thought it lost." Sansa shook her head. "Survival is not victory. It's the beginning of one." He looked up at the sky, where clouds gathered like pale wolves. "There are darker things coming, Sansa. The Wall sends fewer ravens each month, and the wildlings speak of dead things walking. If the tales are true," she met his eyes, "then Winterfell must be ready." "Aye," Jon said, "but I cannot hold both crown and sword. The North needs more than a king. It needs a heart." She frowned. "And you think that heart is me?" He smiled, tired but sure. "It always was." The words struck her harder than she expected. "Jon, He shook his head. "We'll speak of it later. For now, rest. The night is long, and there's work to be done come morning." When he was gone, Sansa remained in the godswood until the last of the firelight faded from the castle windows. Above her, the moon rode high and cold, casting silver across the heart tree's face. For the first time since her return, she felt not only the weight of her home, but the weight of what it asked of her. The next morning brought news that shattered the fragile calm. A rider came from the south, half frozen, his horse dying beneath him. He bore a letter sealed with golden wax. When Jon broke it, his face darkened. "What is it?" Sansa asked. "Queen Daenerys Targaryen," he said slowly. "She has landed at Dragonstone. She commands the lords of Westeros to bend the knee, and she summons the king in the north to do the same." The hall fell silent. The name carried with it both awe and dread. "Dragons," they whispered, 3 of them, living and full-grown. Royce, who had ridden north with Sansa and remained at Winterfell's side, spoke first. "The North bends the knee to no one. Not again." Jon folded the letter. "She is not Cersei. She is said to fight for the realm, not against it." Royce's mouth tightened. And yet every Targaryen who came before her claimed the same. Sansa said nothing, but her mind raced. She remembered tales her father had told of the Mad King, and the smoke that rose from King's Landing the day dragons last ruled the skies. Jon turned to her. "What would you counsel?" She met his gaze steadily. "If she is truly as she claims, then she will understand the North's need for freedom. But if she comes seeking chains, then we must be ready to meet her with fire and steel." Jon nodded. "Then I will go to her and see what she is." The hall erupted in protest. "You can't go," cried Lady Mormont. "You're the king in the north." "And a king must know his allies," Jon said. "If the dead truly march, we cannot face them alone." Sansa rose, her voice calm but strong. "Then I will rule in your stead until your return." The hall quieted. The lords looked from her to Jon, uncertain. Jon met her eyes, a faint smile touching his lips. "Winterfell is yours, sister. Guard it well." That night, as he prepared to ride south, she found him in the courtyard saddling his horse. The wind whipped through the gates, cold and sharp. "You've always been the brave one," she said softly. He looked up, his dark hair blowing across his face. Bravery is often only another word for foolishness. "Then be a fool who returns," she said. "The North cannot lose another Stark." He grasped her hand. "Neither can you." Then he mounted and rode into the snow, the gates closing behind him. Sansa stood watching long after he was gone, until the wind erased his tracks. Around her, Winterfell seemed to breathe, old and patient, its stones whispering of long winters past. She turned toward the great hall, where fires waited to be lit, letters to be sent, oaths to be sworn. The weight upon her shoulders felt heavy, but not unbearable. Winter had come, and Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, would see that the North endured it. The snows grew heavier with each passing day. Winterfell's walls rose like black teeth from a sea of white, and the wind that swept through its courtyards carried the chill of the far north. It had been 3 weeks since Jon rode south to meet the Dragon Queen, and each dawn without word from him deepened the hush that lay over the castle. Sansa had grown accustomed to that silence. It was the kind that came before storms. Not peace, but waiting. She ruled from the great hall beneath the banner of the direwolf, hearing petitions from the lords of the North, settling quarrels over food, land, and loyalty. The harvests were poor, the stores thin. Even with the help of the Vale, famine hovered near. Yet she met each complaint with calm, her voice steady, her mind sharp. The men who once doubted her began to listen. The small folk called her the Snow Queen, not for coldness, but for her grace amid the frost. She smiled at that in private, though part of her feared it too. Queens, she knew, did not often live long in Westeros. The Maester came to her often, bearing news from the south, or what passed for news. Ravens carried rumors of dragons seen above the narrow sea, of burning fleets and shattered armies. Yet no word bore Jon's hand or seal. At night, she stood upon the ramparts, staring into the darkness beyond the walls. The north spread endless before her, a wilderness of ice and forest. Somewhere beyond those woods the wall still stood, or so she hoped. The wildlings said strange things of it now, that the ice wept, that the dead whispered beneath it. She told herself she did not believe them. It was near midnight when the horn sounded. The note was long and low, rising through the storm like a cry from the deep. Sansa turned sharply, her heart pounding. 3 times the horn blew before it fell silent. She descended the steps to the courtyard, her guards following close. There, beyond the gates, torches flickered in the snow. A rider approached, swaying in the saddle, his horse lathered and bleeding from the cold. When he dismounted, she saw the black cloak of the Night's Watch. "My lady," the man gasped. "I come from Eastwatch, the wall—" He broke off, his voice hoarse. "The wall is broken." The words fell like stones into silence. Sansa gripped his arm. "What do you mean, broken?" "Fire," he whispered. "And ice. A dragon with eyes blue as death. It came from the storm. The wall fell, my lady. The dead are marching south." A murmur ran through the gathered men. The rider sank to his knees, his strength spent. Sansa turned to her captain. "Get him to the Maester. Send word to every keep in the north. The dead come." The man bowed and ran. She stood still for a long moment, the snow whirling around her. Then she whispered, "Jon, where are you?" By dawn, all of Winterfell was awake. Bells tolled in the towers, summoning lords and soldiers alike. The news spread faster than fire. The wall had fallen, and the Night King was real. In the great hall, Sansa sat at the high seat with Lord Royce beside her and Lyanna Mormont before her, fierce as ever despite the fear in her eyes. "Then it's true," Lyanna said. "The dead walk. We must march." "To where?" asked Lord Glover. "If they come from the wall, they'll reach us before the snows melt. We cannot fight winter itself." "We will fight what we must," Sansa said, her voice cutting through the clamor. "The North has faced darkness before. We will face it again." "Without the king?" Glover spat. "Your brother sought dragons when he should have been preparing his walls." Sansa's gaze hardened. "My brother sought allies, not monsters. He fights for all of us." Royce raised a hand. "Enough. We cannot quarrel now. We must prepare. Send ravens to the Vale. Every knight who can bear arms must come north. Winterfell will be the shield of the realm." Sansa nodded. "And I will be its hand." That night, she walked the battlements again. The air was colder now, sharp as broken glass. The aurora danced faintly over the horizon, strange lights that made the snow gleam blue and green. She remembered her father standing where she stood, speaking softly of the long winters of old, when the sun vanished for months and the world slept beneath the ice. He had said the same words every Stark learned as a child. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. For so long she had been the lone wolf, but no longer. A sound behind her made her turn. Brienne of Tarth stood in the torchlight. Her armor rhymed with frost. "My lady," she said, "the scouts have returned. There are fires on the horizon, leagues north. Could be wildlings, could be worse." Sansa looked to the north, where faint orange sparks flickered against the dark. "Keep the men ready. If the wall truly fell, there will be no safety anywhere." Brienne bowed, but did not move. "You should rest. You've not slept in days." "Neither have you," Sansa said gently. Brienne allowed herself a faint smile. "Then we are both fools." "Perhaps," Sansa said, "but fools who keep watch may yet save the wise who sleep." When Brienne was gone, she lingered a while longer, staring into the distance until her eyes burned. The fires were gone now, swallowed by the snow, but she could still feel them, moving closer with every breath. Days passed in a blur of cold and preparation. Winterfell became a fortress anew. The forges burned day and night, hammering out spearheads of dragon glass mined from the mountains near the wall. Ravens came from White Harbor and the Vale, promising men and ships, though few could travel through the blizzards. Then, one evening, another raven came, bearing a seal of black and red, the Targaryen sigil. Her hands trembled as she broke it. "To the Lady Sansa Stark of Winterfell, your brother rides north with me and my army. The wall has fallen, but not all is lost. We bring dragons and fire to fight the darkness. Hold fast. The North shall stand together or perish together. Daenerys Stormborn, Queen of Dragons." Beneath the queen's hand was another, written in the sharp, familiar strokes of her brother. "Sansa, trust her. We come as soon as the passes open. Keep them safe until we arrive." The relief that washed through her was sharp as pain. Jon lived, but the words of the Watchrider still echoed in her mind. A dragon with eyes blue as death. There would be fire in this war, yes, but also frost. That night, she stood once more before the heart tree, the candle in her hand, flickering against the cold. "Father," she whispered, "the dead come again. I have done as you would have wished. I have ruled with justice. I have guarded our home. but now I must guard the world." The wind stirred the red leaves, and for an instant, she thought she heard a sigh. When she rose, she felt the strength of Winterfell beneath her feet, the old power of the North, the blood of Starks long dead, but never gone. She turned toward the castle and the people who waited for her command. "Sound the horns," she told the guards upon the walls. "The North will not hide behind stone. We will meet the storm head on." And as the horns called through the frozen night, their echoes rolling over the snowfields like thunder, Sansa Stark lifted her eyes to the sky, where faint shapes moved against the stars, dark wings vast as clouds, and whispered to herself, "Winter has come, but so have we." The cold had teeth that season, and it bit deep. Each morning, the gates of Winterfell were rimed with frost, and the air beyond them shone like glass. The North was gathering for war. From the White Knife to the Shadow Tower, banners streamed through the snows, bears and mermen, moose and mountain cats, the sigils of houses that had once feuded, now bound by the single truth of the coming night. The fields outside the walls became a camp of tents and fires, a sea of steel beneath the pale sky. Sansa walked among them daily, wrapped in furs, her hair braided tight against the wind. Men bowed as she passed, women nodded, with the grim respect born of fear and faith alike. She spoke to them in quiet tones, not of glory, but of endurance. The North would not fall while its heart still beat. Inside the castle, Winterfell's courtyards thrummed with life. Smiths hammered through the night, shaping dragon glass into arrowheads and blades. Masters tallied food and counted stores of pitch and salt. Even the children carried buckets of snow to melt for water. Every hand worked, and still it never seemed enough. On the ramparts, Brienne of Tarth stood watch, her eyes scanning the white horizon. Beside her, Arya Stark had returned at last. Silent, quick as shadow, her face colder than the snows she moved through. No one knew how she had come, only that she was there, and that her dagger gleamed black as obsidian. When Sansa saw her sister again, the air between them was strange, a mixture of love and unease. Arya was no longer the girl who had chased cats through the halls of Winterfell. She was something sharper now, something carved by death and vengeance. Still, when they stood together in the Godswood, they spoke as sisters once more. "You wear mother's face," Arya said softly. "And you wear father's," Sansa replied. Arya smiled, a rare thing, fleeting and fierce. "Then the pack is home again." "The pack?" Sansa echoed, looking up at the heart tree's red leaves swaying in the still air. "It will have to be strong." 3 days later, a horn sounded from the southern hills, one long, low note that rolled like thunder through the snow. Scouts rode down from the wall to meet the newcomers. At dusk, the dragons came. The first sound was the beating of wings, vast and deep, stirring the snow into swirling tempests. Then came the roar, an ancient, primeval sound that made the stones of Winterfell tremble. The sky above turned black as a storm cloud as two great shapes descended, their scales glinting like fire in the torchlight. The smaller dragon landed first, its wings folding with a sound like canvas torn by wind. Upon its back sat a woman cloaked in white and silver, her hair pale as moonlight, her eyes bright and unyielding. Behind her came Jon Snow, the courtyard filled with cries of wonder and fear. Men dropped to one knee, others merely stared, mouths agape. Sansa stepped forward, her breath a pale mist in the cold. "Jon," she said. He dismounted and took her hands. "It's good to see you." "You said you would return with fire," she murmured, glancing at the dragons. "I did not think you meant it so plainly." A faint smile crossed his lips. "These are not weapons to fear, Sansa. They're hope, or what's left of it." He turned to the woman beside him. "This is Daenerys Targaryen, rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms." Daenerys inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "Your home is beautiful," she said, though her breath steamed from the cold, "and your people strong. I hope they will be our allies in what is to come." Sansa bowed, her tone cool but courteous. "Winterfell welcomes all who fight for life." The queen's gaze lingered a moment longer, as if weighing the words, then turned to the keep. "We have much to discuss." The days that followed were uneasy. The dragons nested in the fields beyond the walls, their presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The small folk whispered of fire and doom in equal measure. Within the castle, Daenerys held council with Jon and Sansa daily. Maps were spread across the long table, candles guttering as the wind pressed through the windows. The army of the dead was moving faster than any had guessed, a tide of corpses sweeping southward through the ruins of Last Hearth and the Wolfswood. "We cannot wait behind walls," Daenerys said. "If the dead reach Winterfell, we are trapped. We must meet them in the field." Jon shook his head. "Open ground will destroy us. The cold is their ally. Here the walls give us strength, the fires give us life." Sansa listened, her hands folded. "Winterfell has stood 1,000 years. If it must fall, let it fall around us, but not before we make the world remember why the North endures." Daenerys's violet eyes met hers. "You speak like a queen, Lady Stark." "I speak like someone who's buried too many kings," Sansa replied. Jon glanced between them, uneasy, but said nothing. When the meeting ended, Sansa lingered alone. The maps before her seemed like the veins of some dying beast, ink and blood alike. She touched the mark where the wall had once stood and whispered, "Father, give me your strength." That night she dreamed of snow, not the gentle fall of winter, but a blizzard without end. She stood alone in the courtyard, the castle buried in ice, the gates torn open. From the storm came the sound of wings, not dragons, but ravens, thousands of them, their eyes burning blue. She woke with a start. A distant horn was sounding. By the time she reached the wall, dawn had barely touched the sky. The scouts were galloping hard from the north, their cries lost in the wind. "The dead!" one shouted. "They're here!" Beyond the ridges, she saw them, a white shimmer spreading like frost fire across the horizon. The dead marched in silence, their armor rimed with ice, their eyes glowing like cold embers. Jon stood beside her, his breath misting. "It begins," he said. Daenerys mounted her dragon, her cloak whipping in the wind. "Then it ends here." The beast roared, and the sky erupted in fire. Sansa watched as the armies of the living formed ranks before the gates, the shields of the north, the banners of the Vale, the Unsullied, and the Dothraki alike. Fires blazed along the trenches, casting light upon the endless night. Jon turned to her. "When the walls break, you lead them below. The crypts will keep them safe." She shook her head. "I will not hide in the dark while my home burns." "You must," he said fiercely. "Winterfell needs its lady as much as its king." Their eyes met. Brother and sister, wolf and snow. Neither spoke again. The first clash of battle broke like thunder. The dead hit the trenches, and the fires flared bright, then dimmed, swallowed by cold. A cry went up from the ramparts. "They're through!" Sansa gripped the battlement, the wind tearing her hair loose. Far below, in the red glow of the fires, she saw death itself rise. Pale hands, hollow faces, endless numbers. Winter had come, and with it, the end of all songs. But she did not turn away, not this time. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, stood upon her walls as the storm swept in, her heart steady as stone. And though the night was full of terror, she whispered the words that had bound her blood for centuries. The pack survives. The dead came with the wind. Their arrival was not heralded by trumpet nor cry, but by the slow extinguishing of light. The night grew thick, as if the stars themselves were snuffed out, and the only glow that remained was the orange flicker of Winterfell's fires, flickers that wavered, dimmed, and vanished one by one as the storm swallowed the world. From the walls, Sansa saw it all. The horizon rolled like a living sea, an endless tide of pale forms surging through the snow. They did not march. They swarmed, crawling and climbing, silent as shadows. Their eyes burned blue. Below, the armies of the living braced themselves. The Dothraki rode first, their curved blades alight with fire. 1,000 flaming arcs cut through the darkness as they charged, a river of light flowing into the night. Sansa held her breath as their war cries echoed, fierce and wild. Then, one by one, the lights began to die. From her high perch, she watched in horror as the flames vanished into the distance, snuffed out in silence, until only a handful remained, scattered like embers in the void. The sound that followed was worse than any scream, the cold, hollow roar of the wind as it swept over the field, bringing with it the stench of death. Daenerys's dragon shrieked, rising into the air, its fire cutting a path through the horde. A great wave of flame roared across the plain, and for a heartbeat, the dead burned. But even flame could not stop them all. The fire flickered and faltered, and through the smoke they came again. "Fall back to the walls!" Jon shouted from the courtyard below. The horns of Winterfell blared, deep and mournful. Men and women fled through the gates, stumbling over the wounded. The trenches were lit, the black pitch ignited in a sudden blaze that circled the keep in fire. For a brief moment, the dead halted before it, hissing and writhing in the heat. Sansa watched from above, her knuckles white against the stone. "Light holds them," she whispered. But the moment passed. The Night King rode forward, pale as moonlight, his armor of frost glinting. He raised one hand. The wind howled. Snow and ice smothered the flames as easily as breath upon a candle. The wall of fire guttered and died. Then the dead were upon the gates. The first impact shook the stones beneath her feet. They came in waves, clawing, climbing, their bodies piling higher with each moment. Arrows rained down, flaming bolts that struck and smoked. But for every one that fell, 10 more came. Sansa turned. "Get them below," she told Brienne, who stood at her side. "The children, the old, now." Brienne hesitated, her sword gleaming. "My place is here. It is at my command," Sansa said sharply. "Do as I say." The knight obeyed. Together they led the last of the small folk toward the crypts where candles flickered in the dark. The air below was damp and heavy with the scent of stone. As the doors closed behind them, the rumble of battle grew faint. In the torchlight, the carved faces of Stark ancestors watched from their alcoves, solemn, unblinking. Sansa stood before her father's statue, the cold stone sword clasped between his hands. "Keep them safe," she whispered. "Keep them safe as you kept us." The ground trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The sound of breaking stone echoed above. Brienne looked up, her eyes narrowing. "They've breached the walls." Sansa's heart clenched. "Jon," she breathed. Above ground, the world had become madness, Dragons wheeled through the black sky, their roars mingling with the clash of steel and the screams of men. Fire and frost danced together, each devouring the other. The living fought not for victory, but for every breath. Jon fought near the gates, his blade of dragonglass gleaming blue in the firelight. Beside him rode Daenerys upon her dragon, its wings beating gales of flame. But even dragons could not turn the tide forever. The Night King advanced, unhurried, untouched. His army flowed around him, endless and unfeeling. Arrows shattered against him. Flames licked and died. Atop the battlements, Arya moved like shadow, her dagger a streak of silver death. She leapt from wall to wall, cutting down wights with swift precision, but even she could not stem the tide. The living fell, and the dead rose again. The great gates splintered. The dead poured into the courtyard. Sansa heard the first screams echo down the stair. Panic rippled through the crypts. Women clutched their children. The air grew thick with terror. Then came a sound she would never forget, the grinding of stone, slow and deep. The statues, cracks spread across the stone faces of the dead Starks. Dust fell, then hands broke through, gray and stiff, reaching. The crypts were no longer safe. Sansa drew the dagger Jon had left her, its blade black as night. "Stay behind me," she told the nearest women. "We fight for our blood." When the first corpse pulled itself free, its eyes blue and burning, she drove the blade through its throat. The thing fell, shuddering. The others followed. Brienne waded into them, her sword a flash of steel. Sparks flew as stone met metal. Sansa fought beside her, striking with every ounce of strength she had. Fear fled. Only purpose remained. For every blow she struck, she thought of Winterfell, its stones, its walls, its people. Of Jon in the storm above. Of Arya, somewhere in the dark. Of her father's words, long ago. The pack survives, and as the dead pressed closer, she shouted those words aloud. "The pack survives!" The cry rose through the crypt, caught and carried by others. "The pack survives!" It was then that the earth above them shook once more, this time not with ruin, but with fire. The heat seared through the stones. Jon had found the Night King. Sansa would remember that moment for the rest of her life. She burst from the crypt into the courtyard and saw the sky alight with dragon fire. Jon stood upon the broken ramparts, his cloak in tatters, his blade raised high. Above him, the Night King faced the Queen's dragon, ice meeting flame in a blinding clash. The fire roared, swallowing both. Then came silence. The wind ceased. The snow fell still. One by one, the wights collapsed, lifeless again. Across the field, bodies toppled like leaves in autumn. The sound of battle faded into the soft hiss of falling snow. Sansa stood in the doorway, her breath ragged, her face streaked with ash and blood. The courtyard was a graveyard, but it was theirs. Through the settling smoke, she saw Arya standing near the heart tree, her dagger dripping black blood. The Night King lay at her feet, shattered as ice. It was over. Sansa sank to her knees. The silence that followed was not peace but disbelief. The world held its breath. Then, slowly, the horns of Winterfell sounded once more, not in warning, but in triumph. The dead had come, and the North had endured. At dawn, the fires were lit again, this time not for battle, but for remembrance. The snow melted where the dragon's fire had burned, leaving the ground dark and steaming. The sun broke through for the first time in weeks, pale and golden. Sansa stood before the gates, wrapped in a cloak of white fur. Her people gathered behind her, weary, wounded, yet alive. Jon and Daenerys stood side by side at the pyres, their faces grave. When they looked to her, Sansa inclined her head. There was no crown upon it, but she felt the weight of one all the same. Winter had come and passed through them like fire through glass, leaving only what was strong enough to remain. And so, the North remembered. The pack survived. Sansa Stark lifted her eyes to the brightening sky, to the falcons circling far above, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. The dawn had returned to Winterfell,